All right, so safety, obviously a top concern because millions of people rely on trains each year. In fact, more than 31 million people rode Amtrak in 2013. Every day, about 2,000 trains run along the Northeast Corridor. That's the busiest stretch of rail in North America. Here's a sobering fact, though. Amtrak lost a staggering $227 million last year. So there's a question hanging in the air out there. Why not just dump Amtrak, sell it to a private company, and call it a day? Let's talk about that now with Congressman Dutch Ruppersberger, a Democrat from Maryland. Good morning, sir.
Good to be here, Carol.
So why not just dump it? Get rid of the government subsidies and sell Amtrak to a private company?
Well, I think part of the problem with Amtrak and the additional cuts last year, $250 million a year, Amtrak would make money if they could just be operating on the East Coast. But Amtrak has the whole country, and there are a lot of places, rural areas, where members of Congress don't want to stop Amtrak. But more importantly, I think what we're really talking about here with respect to this horrible accident, and it's so sad for the families. And I also want to give a shout out to the first responders who did an excellent job once this occurred. But we have this bill called sequestration, which means everything is cut across the board. This is hurting our country in everything that we do. This is not the way to run a country. And as an example, when you cut everything across the board, then you make everything weak. Budgeting is about priorities. Sure, we have to deal with the spending level. So until we deal and repeal this law, our country is going to be weaker. We're competing with Russia, with China. We have all sorts of issues in our military with ISIS and other areas like that. So my proposal, I'm calling out to the President of the United States, to the leadership on the Senate and the House, our leadership, Senate and the House, Republican and Democrat, to sit down and to find a plan and a way to repeal this sequestration. Because it's not right for our country. We're the best country in the world. We want to stay that way. But you can't keep cutting things across the board. You can't not spend money to take care of things such as transportation because you're putting our people at risk. Eventually, we're going to have more incidents like that. We had it in Washington, D.C., WMATA, in the system there. Now we're having it here.
Well, let me throw this by you. So,
sure.
Amtrak is dealing with $52 million in infrastructure problems.
Right.
Would a private company assume that debt and say, yeah, sure, we'll take Amtrak, a company that lost more than $200 million last year? That's not going to happen, right?
I agree. But look, we have to study that and then come out with what we think is the best system. But you can't keep cutting your way out of issues when it comes to infrastructure. And by the way, fix the infrastructure, it creates jobs too. So I think it's something that has to be on the table. The way I see it, in my analysis, I'm an appropriator, and I was on the Intelligence Committee, so I specialize in more national security. But when I looked at this issue myself, it's more about the fact that there's tremendous demand on the East Coast and probably the West Coast, but in the more rural areas, that costs a lot of money to maintain that. So we have to look at that, whether or not there will be an issue of restructuring Amtrak. But people use it. If you want to deal with the traffic issue, you have to have more in the area of rail. And people need to have confidence in rail that they can, when they get on it, when they pay their ticket. I use from Baltimore to Washington. I live north of Baltimore. I use it occasionally. And when you get on and pay your money, you want to make sure that you're safe. And this
absolutely.
And this thing, I know the National Transportation Safety Board is looking at this. It appears as if it's probably the engineer's error. However, you heard the testimony. You started your program by saying that there's technology out there that should be implemented, but they can't implement it to slow these trains down on a curve because there isn't money.
And I want to ask you specifically about that. This positive train control, supposedly that system was supposed to be in every single Amtrak train by the end of this year, but that's not likely to happen because funding keeps getting cut.
And
it's a very expensive system.
That is the issue of sequestration. But budgeting is about picking your priorities. Transportation is a priority, getting people to and from work or wherever they're going to go. So we have to make that a priority. We have to deal with spending, there's no question, but it's about picking what our priorities are. Our priorities, helping children, education. We have to have a national security system that protects our citizens. We have to make sure we protect our streets. We just had a terrible incident in Baltimore. We have to deal with that issue from top to bottom, dealing with the kids as they start out growing up in conditions like that. So we don't have these types of unrest in our different urban areas. That's priority. Yes, go ahead.
Here's how it sort of looks. You know, we're having problems with the post office too, but that's not being fixed. It's just kind of lingering out there, and that seems like what's been happening with Amtrak for years and years. It's just a linger until, like, maybe it'll disappear. I don't know. So why can't lawmakers sit down and work this out?
Well, a lot of us have been trying. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot of cooperation in the last couple terms. Hopefully that will get better. But again, I want to get back to the issue of budgeting. You know, I used to be a county executive where we had over 800,000 people. I did a budget every year. We couldn't have everything they wanted, but you pick your priorities. It seems to me transportation, clearly a priority. You talk about the post office, that people have relied on that years ago. Now we have to make that a priority, and we have to oversee it and manage it. And that's part of what a job is of a mayor, county executive, the president, governors. That's what they do. But it's a matter of working things out. Resolving issues and picking priorities has to be done. That's the way our government has run for years. But right now, unfortunately, the climate in Washington isn't that way. Maybe this negative incident that just occurred will make sure people come together and work these issues out.
We'll see. Congressman Dutch Ruppersberger, thanks so much. I appreciate it. I'll be right back.